Human existence, the theatre of the absurd would have us believe, is fundamentally pointless. Every decision we make, every conversation we have is weighed down with the useless necessities we carry with us like heavy luggage, in the hopes that we might ironically keep our heads above the water. This is also playwrights like Harold Pinter, Samuel Beckett, Carol Churchill argue, quite entertaining. And so they adapted it, this weird schadenfreude, into a body of work that evolved over time to capture the pointlessness of the human condition in an ever-changing social atmosphere. Overall, the foundations of absurdism as a theatrical movement lie in its distrust of the external world. After World War II, society was dominated with an underlying malaise that kept its inhabitants downtrodden and paranoid. The fear of hostile takeover, of displacement, the fear of language being used to manipulate, and overall, the fear of the lack of purpose are the hallmarks of the theatre of the absurd. The spectator, according to Martin Esslin, is kept firmly on the outside of the action, witnessing the interactions between characters without knowing their relationships or the intricacies of them, as newly arrived visitors might watch life in a country of which they have not yet mastered the language. Harold Pinter's The Birthday Party features the characters of McCann and Goldberg, two hostile entities whose invasion into an otherwise normal bed and breakfast is marked by their pointed and menacing interrogations of Stanley Weber, one of the inhabitants. The relationship they have with Weber is never disclosed to the audience. In a way, the play seems almost to be missing its first act, the section that establishes the motivations and interrelationships between characters before the conflict emerges. Instead, we are given this.
She's not the leper, Weber. What did you wear last week, Weber? Where do you keep your suits?
Why did you leave the organization?
What would your old mum say?
Why did you betray us?
You hurt me, Weber. You're playing a dirty game.
There is no way for us to know why Goldberg and McCann act this way, just as there is no way for us to know why Weber reacts in the way he does, with this blind terror and confusion. Their motivations are hidden from us, drawing on what Bertolt Brecht termed the Verfremdungseffekt, or distancing. I'll talk more about this in the second part of the video. Pinter keeps the text playfully horrifying, a comedy of menace, a spiderweb of hidden connections. We gain pleasure from watching the characters suffer, not because we understand them, but because we don't. In a similar vein, Samuel Beckett also hides the relationships between characters. His play Endgame starts with the character of Clove opening curtains, preparing a dismal and empty room and its equally miserable inhabitant Ham for a day that never seems to arrive. He delivers a nonsensical monologue, beginning with the line, "Finished. It's finished. Nearly finished. It must be nearly finished." Though like in The Birthday Party, we never know exactly what he is referring to. Throughout the play, Ham and Clove engage in pointless conversations that, while fast-paced and humorous, possess an underlying layer of hopelessness. The play can be seen as a meandering, purposeless single act that follows not much at all. Beckett also makes use of symbolism to indicate the ridiculousness of the rituals we take for granted. In Waiting for Godot, Vladimir and Estragon spend a lot of time waiting for something that never actually arrives, seemingly a subversive indictment of the audience's tendency to do exactly the same thing. In Pinter's The Caretaker, Davies doggedly attempts to turn on a light despite finding that the bulb is gone, repeating the same motion over and over and over again before being scared by Mick, who comedically exclaims, "I was just doing some spring cleaning," before reinstalling the light bulb, rendering Davies' attempts to regain normalcy pointless. The use of language to disorient here also harkens back to the carefully crafted words used to manipulate and amass power a decade prior, during World War II. Esslin claims that the absurdity of the characters' actions within the theatre serves to show the audience the ridiculousness of the values society takes for granted, stating that the absurd and fantastic goings-on of the theatre of the absurd will, in the end, be found to reveal the irrationality of the human condition and the illusion of what we thought was its apparent logical structure. The theatre of the absurd is bizarre, thrilling, and, as with most theatrical movements, constantly changing. The origins of absurdism focused on the distrust of the external world. Mark Jackson provides us with some reasonable causes for this distrust in the introduction to Stress in Post-War Britain, citing the collapse of previously held social views as an inciter of stress among the post-war generation. Upon returning to their homes, soldiers found conditions different. Values had changed while they'd been away, and adjustments were needed to adapt to the dueling conditions of labor and family. It's no surprise that absurdist plays written around this time tended to focus on the distance one feels when confronted with a totally bewildering new world. As time has progressed, modern values have come to influence the movement. Modern absurdist theatre, such as the work of Carol Churchill, has moved away from this external skepticism and towards the questioning of the self, the internal world. Before we begin, I'd like to come back to Bertolt Brecht and his concept of distancing, or as he terms it in Alienation Effects in Chinese Acting, the Befremdungseffekt. Brecht himself defined the term as playing in such a way that the audience was hindered from simply identifying itself with the characters of the play, and used various techniques to heighten the unreality of the performance. Actors wore masks, used exaggerated gestures to express their inner monologues, and acknowledged the presence of the audience to prevent them from being immersed in the play. According to Estlin, absurdist theatre is very similar and, in fact, surpasses Brecht's own theatrical style in its execution of distancing. In his eyes, the dissonance created by epic theatre is marred by its rationality, which the theatre of the absurd does not possess. It is impossible to identify oneself with characters one does not understand, or whose motives remain a closed book, and so the distance between the public and the happenings on the stage can be maintained. Churchill's Love and Information incites a similar effect in its use of characters. As in early absurdist theatre, the text given to the actor is cyclical and bordering on meaningless. In the scene Lab, a passage of dialogue reads, "And the idea is it's different in the different. What we hope to see you see is that it's different depending on what they've learned about." Yes, because we give them the beads again, and they have learned. The repetition of specific phrases here is bizarre, and very similar to the repetition seen in earlier absurdist works. The language used is understandable, though the way in which it's put together is not. Sentences end abruptly, only to be repeated in the next line, though never with the same phrasing, as one would expect from other uses of repetition for effect. The overall sensation the audience feels is jarring, a whiplash of conflated phrases. Unlike other absurdist texts, however, the slurry of words is not spoken by any specific character. The lines in Love and Information are unattributed, forming walls of text for the executors of the script to experiment with as they please. Both early and modern absurdist theatre feature power dynamics that shift and change seemingly at random. Pozzo and Lucky in Waiting for Godot switch places as master and servant in their second appearance in the play, just as Aston and Mick switch in The Caretaker. Churchill goes further in this, fully disconnecting the character from the actor. In Cloud 9, the cast in Act 1 each play different roles in Act 2, though the characters remain largely the same across both. In the original performance, the actors playing Betty and her son Edward exchanged characters in the second half. The role switching provides the opportunity for a kind of metatextuality, provoking questions about the continued effects of trauma on the generations that follow. The questions prompted by Churchill's modern absurdism are more in relation to the individual. The pointlessness surrounding notions of gender, sexuality, and race are explored through a more experimental theatrical style. The evolution here seems clear. In the past, the collapse that led to paranoia and stress in the post-war generation was complex, but definitively external, brought on by the pressures of the outside world. The pointlessness explored in the modern theatre of the absurd is internal. The values we hold, not the ones that society does. It's confronting as all absurdist theatre is, though the unreality, the absurdity we feel is our own. It's Caliban looking in the mirror. It is us questioning ourselves and the values we carry with us, our heavy luggage, in the hopes that we might accept our descent into the water, to find something true beneath its surface.